Planning, Environment, and Development Committee meeting of April 4th to order. We have minutes for approval. Moved by Mr. Godemauer, seconded by, roll call? Okay, yeah.
I'll do that too.
I worked on getting the sheet right here. Joe?
I'm here.
Carolyn?
Here.
John?
Here.
Jim? Here. Carl?
Here.
Lou Ness is the only one that's not here.
Now I'll move for
Okay.
4 minutes.
So Mr. Godemauer moved to approve the minutes, seconded by Carl. Is there any comments about the minutes from the last meeting? No comments, we'll go to vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Minutes are approved. We'll go to public comment. And the first one on the list is Mr. Vanderspool. 3 minutes, please.
Understood. My name is Jan Vanderspool. I live at 8708 Bull Run Trail. I've appeared before this group more than 7 times offering proposals to try and resolve the unintended consequence of my neighbor's ADU going up while violating the neighborhood's covenants. I've just resubmitted what I've provided to you previously since February, begging for consideration of a way to address it more directly. But I'll get off of that bandwagon for now and demonstrate my hat, and if I may take the liberty of putting it on, I call this my gypsy moth shield. Let me explain. The gypsy moth was renamed due to changes in the naming conventions. The Entomological Society of America in 2021 officially changed the rules for naming insects so that no longer references to ethnicities, races, or people groups can be used in the naming. Starting in 2021, they assembled scholars come up with a new name. Gypsy was considered to be offensive to the Romani people. The new name comes from the appearance of the egg masses. Now, on to my experience last year with gypsy moths, spongy moths. Started with my arborist saying, "You got a problem, son." And from there, I was listening, and it sounded like it was raining. Seriously. Well, that was the poop from the caterpillars, hence the shield. I did spray chemically to try and preserve my 100 to 200 year oaks. It's a swath of oaks extending beyond north of Mason Hill down to Crystal Lake Ave and all points east. I was beside myself after spraying. The caterpillar bodies were almost solid on the ground. It was substantial and complete defoliation. I'm really worried about my trees. I'm really worried about consequences of an infestation again this year. I hope to hear suggestions to protect my oaks beyond just letting it happen again. I did look into the bacteria spraying that is referenced in your handouts. But there was a minimum purchase of the bacteria that needs to cover about 30 acres, much more than my immediate neighborhood, and that also made it unaffordable. So that's my primary reason for being here, besides begging for relief on my ADU in unintended consequences. So I'll take my shield off. Thank you.
Okay, Next in the sign up was Frank and Sue. You want to just come up here so they can get you on the speaker? Right where Mr.
Okay,
Vanderspool was is fine.
well,
Please introduce yourself and why
Okay.
you're here. I don't know that everybody from the committee knows.
no, we haven't met, but Tracy and you, we have been pen pals, as well as Pete, Austin, and Scott, where are you? There. Okay. Well, I'm very grateful that you're able to hear from us. And I had no idea, A, that Mr. Vanderspool was going to speak about spongy moths. I also did not know that he was coming, and I have known his wife for years. His property is on the east side of Woodstock, east, north,
I'd say south,
whoops.
yeah.
And we're outside of Marengo. My name is Susan Walillo, and this is my husband Frank. We are here representing our neighborhood. We have approximately 30 homeowners. A lot of them are 1.5 acre properties. Some of them are 20 acres, depending on where it is. We are heavily dense woods with trees that are 100 to 120 feet tall. What happened to us, similar to what Mr. Vanderspool was talking about, is that last summer, in June, we began to notice that the trees, these big, beautiful trees that had green leaves on them, all of a sudden, the leaves were disappearing. They weren't coming down to the ground, they were disappearing. And that's when we noticed massive amounts of caterpillars crawling up the trunks. Now, I brought handouts because I used to be a teacher, so I always have to have handouts. But there on the top, you will see that the top is this year's infestation, 2023. We took these pictures in February. Now, we have dozens of photographs. I will spare you the dozens, but those on the top are representative of what we saw in February. I believe it was February 7th, of the egg masses on just a couple of our trees, representative of many, many trees over several acres. On the bottom is what happened last year. What happened last year is that the caterpillars were not only crawling up the trees. I don't know if you've had this or not, but for us, they were crawling on the houses, they were crawling under the eaves, they were crawling under the cars, they were crawling on children's play sets, they were crawling everywhere, hundreds and hundreds. You would say 1,000, thousands. Yeah, all over the place. Of course, we freaked out. We didn't know what they were. So what we did was we called an arborist and paid an arborist to come out to tell us, first of all, what they were, because we didn't even know. And he alerted us to what they were. And this was in June. He said, basically, the cat is out of the bag. This year, you can't do anything because they're already up in the trees, they're already eating, they're already filling their bellies. So he said, it's not much that you can do. So because we were frantic, I mean, these caterpillars were everywhere. Like he said, outside, that was a good description. It sounded like rain. And what it was the poop. It was like poppy seeds all over our driveways, our sidewalks. Well, that wasn't so bad. It was just the caterpillars were, just all over the place. So we knew it wasn't going to have much of an impact, but because we are who we are, out in our neck of the woods, we're very independent. We solve problems on our own. We, talk back and forth with neighbors. What did you do? How are you doing things? Anyways, what happened was we started to pull them off the trees. We started to pull them off the barns. By the time we would get under the eaves, all the way around, cleaning off all the caterpillars, by the time we would get around to the beginning where we started, it looked like we had done nothing because they were all there again. And you will see, there's one picture on there, I think, of under the eave, where you see kind of masses under there. Did I put that on there? Oh, no, I guess I didn't, sorry. Sorry about that. trust me, we have a lot of pictures. So anyways, we all did different things. Some of them pulled them off. We had, Father's Day was, the activity was pulling spongy moths off of our buildings and cars and everything. That's what we did all Father's Day, climbing ladders to try to pull them off, to at least reduce some of the impact. Of course, it's like spitting in the wind, but that's what we did. Then we started to research, and that's what brought us to Nancy Johnson, who is the Illinois Department of Agriculture. She is the spongy moth specialist for 25 years, and she is a wealth of information. She kind of clued us into what some of our options were, what we could do, but she agreed that last year there was nothing that we could do. So we have done whatever we could. One of our neighbors used his leaf blower to blow the caterpillars off of his property. That wasn't such a good idea. He was well-intentioned, but blowing the caterpillars off of your property just blows them onto somebody else's property. But we get it because he had small children. So that was understandable, but that's how frantic some of us were because of what we were seeing. So anyways, cutting to the chase, we researched, we've attended webinars, we have talked to experts, we have talked to people. We have no idea beyond our woods. We have no idea where else spongy moths are in the county. All that we know is on the back of that, you will see a map. And the map shows that McHenry County is pretty much dead center of the infestation. So in some areas, it's worse than others. They call it hot spots when it really flares up. And hot spots are caterpillars, spongy moth caterpillars that are kind of get turbocharged. And so they multiply faster, they go farther, and we've seen this year, because my husband particularly has walked our woods big time, all the acres, we can see how much more they've spread. Not only our area, but not only like our parcel of land, but all through the whole area. What does it do to our trees? Our trees are 100 to 120 feet tall. We can't spray from the bottom. Sprays only go up 45 feet. And they tell us, it seems pretty common, that spongy moths will stress any healthy tree the first year. The second year, they will really stress the tree. In fact, sometimes the trees will die. And the third year, they will probably die. So, and that's on the Illinois Department of Agriculture. I'm not making that up. It's a real tough thing. So, anyways, what we're saying to you is, we began to realize as we were researching and talking with people, this is way over our pay grade. It's not something that we can handle on our property, and our neighbors felt the same way. And so we're here to ask you to help us come up with solutions, or a solution that will help reduce. We're never going to stop it, ever. These spongy moths are not indigenous to the United States. They've been around since 1869, so that's not going to happen. But we can slow the spread, which, interestingly enough, online, www.slowthespread.org gives you massive amounts of information. So that's what we can do, is we can slow the spread and take our area at least down to a manageable level. So please, we're doing everything that we can. Research, pulling things off buildings, doing everything that we can, calling people. We need help. And we need help soon, because this year is year 2 for some of our trees. And we're on top of it, because spraying, if spraying is the route, which makes the most sense for trees that are as tall as ours, spraying usually occurs between May and June. Those are the months, and they spray, if they do it aerially, which in our case you can't shoot up, you've got to shoot down, in a very fine mist, a half a gallon of BTK, which is a biodegradable product that the spongy moths eat, their bellies swell, and they die. And so it's a half a gallon per acre in a very, very fine mist. that goes across the top of the trees. It does not harm fish, animals, you know, the whole list. It doesn't, in birds, anything. It's been around, they've been using it for over 30 years. You can see by the map, we're not new to this business, it's all over. And so we need to have some solutions on that.
Okay, we're gonna have a presentation on it this morning, you
Yep.
know that.
Yep.
I hope you can stay for that.
I will, yeah, we will.
And thank you for your
You're
presentation.
quite welcome, thank you. We look
Um,
forward to working.
Could she have her 3 minutes? Could I just make a few more comments as an individual?
Yeah, I've sort of stretched the
Yeah.
3-minute roll.
Yeah.
Sure.
Well, just to fill in a little bit of the gaps on her, the trees that we're talking about, at least in our neighborhood, it's over 100 acres of people. So we are 1.5 acres of the 100 acres. So we've tried to combine all the neighbors to kind of just get together and sell this. The trees that we're talking about, we had the Oak Conservancy from McHenry County come out, and our trees on our property are between 200 and 225 years old, back to the War of 1812 stuff. So we don't want to lose that as a resource. It's a beauty for the county. And what I did is, this is egg masses that I pulled off last week from one neighbor's tree that was in the area of about the size of this room. These are cumulative egg masses, and every egg mass that I pulled off has about 100 little BBs of eggs in it. And every little egg becomes a caterpillar that goes up the trees and strips them out. It looks like fall at the end of the year, but this is one neighbor's worth. And the little black things in here are called pupa. It's the caterpillars go up, they hatch, or they hatch from the eggs, they go up the tree, they eat the trees up, they come back down, they form the pupas, and the pupas become moths. That's where you get the gypsy moth part. And the moths come from this area, and there's a male and a female, and what they end up doing is spreading. So June is the caterpillars, July is when the moths start to develop, and that's how the spread happens. The spread happens because the male and female, you know what they do. Then they fly, and then like mid-July, our whole woods looks like fairyland. All these moths are flitting around. As much as I pulled caterpillars off trees and we destroyed those, it didn't matter, because hundreds of eggs from each little egg mass, which you might see from the pictures there, spread like fairyland. I mean, it's amazing. So this year it was like in our upper third of the neighborhood. And then it's spreading in further into the 100 acres. So what we're trying to do is seek out your help in the fact that we as mere neighbors can only spray because a neighbor did come out and have a spraying. And they said, we can only shoot 45 feet up with our boom truck. 45 feet out of 120 feet, we're not killing the problems. So we're asking the county to help us. Maybe help fund or approve funding or forward it to the general board to give us some relief, because otherwise a big asset, 100 acres within McHenry County, is going to be gone. Because I'll pass this around, it's not very pretty, but every one of these is little eggs in there. One neighbor's property.
That's okay.
Thank you.
We don't need it passed around. Thank you.
I'll leave it here for observation.
We're gonna just keep moving along because we do have an interview.
Yes, I appreciate that.
We have an interview this morning. Cindy, I know you signed up, but we have you actually on the agenda for presentation. So that's
Oh,
when.
yeah, I'm sorry, I did that by
Yeah,
mistake.
that's no problem. Mark, did you want,
Yeah, sure. If
please, 3 minutes, please?
I'm an attorney, I can't do that. Mark Saladin, Zank, Cohen, Wright, and Saladin in Crystal Lake. I'm here on behalf of my client who has a zoning board matter, which is coming up on the April board. But it's a little bit of an unusual situation that I do have to at least bring to your attention. The ZBA vote at the end of December, early January, was 4-3 in favor. This is the sawmill on Route 14, the G&C sawmill. It's zoning number 2022-041. So when the vote occurred, again, a 4-3 recommendation of approval, but of course that's not a recommendation that goes to the full county board. The problem is we have a couple of conditions that are inconsistent. The sawmill takes in wood products, logs, pallets, and they process them down into mulch. The problem is the height of the piles. both the pre-processed material and the processed material. Right now, there's inconsistent conditions which talk about both have to be 6 feet, and then there's one that says the process can be 15 feet. So we have to rectify the inconsistency. But in order to basically have them, they've been there 20 years. They've had 2 extensions of their conditional use. This is a renewal extension. If the vote is no, you basically put them out of business. If the vote is yes with the existing conditions as they are, then you're going to have enforcement issues because the state's attorney will want to come out and enforce those conditions. So when I talk to staff, I've talked to Adam, I've talked to Renee, we hopefully have come up with a solution, but it would require a board member to make an amendment to those conditions on the floor, either the COW meeting or at the regular board meeting. So what we're asking for is the condition be for both the processed material, the mulch, and the pre-processed material, which is the pallets and the wood logs, be 18 feet in height. Just keep it at a uniform. That's what their equipment height is, so they need it that high. So if we can get that, and then the last condition would be, this is the last renewal, they're going to be retiring. But we've talked to staff and would agree to a condition that basically the property is going to be restored in 10 years so that it doesn't look as bad as it does. And I'll be honest with you that when you get on the property, there's piles of debris, but it's a sawmill. So what I'd ask is that you consider at the appropriate time, make the conditions number 2 and 15 to be 18 feet, same height for processed material and pre-processed material, and that a new condition be added where we'll have the property restored within those 10 years. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Appreciate it.
Very good. Okay, that's the end of
Can we
public.
talk about that later?
Pardon?
Can we talk about that later, after the meeting, I guess?
You and I could.
Thank
Not
you.
as a,
It also goes under zoning applications when we get to that.
okay.
Okay, that's.
Yeah, that's,
Larry,
yes.
I apologize. I didn't have it open because I was not quite here when I wanted to be. But in the minutes,
Mhm.
under Unified Development Ordinance, text amendment 5.1, it says additionally regarding the solar fields, and they put in more restrictive setback requirements among other things. I thought they were less restrictive.
I guess I'm not familiar with what paragraph you're looking at, so.
Like
So,
the setback requirements for.
They're less restrictive than what the Unified Development Ordinance
Correct,
currently
so
enforces.
when it says the state put together timetables and constraints on zoning processes from the time of application, et cetera. Additionally, they put in more restrictive setback requirements among other things, and I think that's actually reverse.
You would be correct.
Okay.
So I would just ask, could we modify the minutes to reflect that change?
Oh, Tiana, that's right away.
You got it? Okay, thanks, Ken. Okay,
Thank
got
you.
it.
Sorry.
You bet, no problem.
Sorry,
Thank
missed
you. We'll move on to members' comments. Do we have any member comments? No member comments. We'll move on to new business. Do we have Emily Patterson-Kane on video? Is that what we're gonna do, Dan? Okay.
Did we interview her at Public Health?
I don't know.
I think, no, oh, it's not.
Okay. Hello, Emily. You're here for the interview for the Historic Preservation Commission. Please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit why you'd want to be on that commission, please.
Hello, are you hearing me all right there?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, so my name's Emily Patterson-Kane. I moved into the Island Lake area a couple of years ago, around the same time that I became an American citizen. And of course, when you do that, you're encouraged to take part in community activities. So I had been looking around for a way that I could contribute. In my hometown, back in New Zealand, I was very interested in history of the town, the architectural and archaeological sites. And so that's sort of been an enduring interest. And last year I also finished a history book on the American history of the animal rights movement. So I'm currently working on an undergraduate textbook on animal welfare, which has a lot of history in it. So I was sort of looking around the county website and I saw this, and I thought, well, that might be a really nice way for me to contribute. I apologise I can't be here today. I work as the Director of Research for the ASPCA, and they scheduled a meeting, but I can clear my calendar with a little bit of advance notice. And of course, they then cancelled that meeting at the last minute anyway, because that's how it seems to go. So that's about it really, unless there's anything else you would like to know.
Okay, well, we certainly appreciate that you stepped up for this. Does any committee members have questions they'd like to ask? I've not seen any questions, Emily. Sounds like you're qualified. We're going to deliberate right now, and we'll let you know. So thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Okay.
It's good to meet you all and hear about the spongy moth. That was pretty interesting. All right, I'll sign off now. Thank
Okay,
you.
very good, thank you. We'll move on to 5.2, deliberation and selection for the Historic Preservation Commission.
Motion to approve Emily Patterson-Kane.
Mr. Gattemuller make a motion to approve Emily Patterson-Kane, and Jim Kearns second it. Any discussion?
Do we have no others? Do we have a need to fill?
I'd have to ask.
One opening.
I'd have to ask staff. There's one opening.
Oh, I thought there was still one besides this one.
Is there one more opening, Peter, on the Historic Preservation Commission, or is this it?
I'm bringing it up right now.
Oh, okay, thanks.
This is it, unless I've missed somebody.
I think so too, but I just
Yeah.
double check.
I know we've been understaffed there for a long time.
There's actually someone serving in that seat. She doesn't want to continue, but she will continue until you guys replace her.
Oh, okay.
They are a full commission right now.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we had that last go around, we had to fill
Okay.
that.
Okay. Any discussion?
The next terms will come due the end of November, and then there'll be 3 of them coming due.
No.
I'm fine with it. I mean, especially seeing that there's a gap of 3 coming up.
Yeah, for sure.
Appreciate her jumping up.
No more discussion, we'll go to vote. Joe?
Yes.
Don?
Yes.
Carolyn?
Yes.
Lou?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Carl?
Yeah.
And I'll vote yes. So Emily Patterson-Kane will be recommended to the county board for the Historic Preservation Commission. Now we're going on to the presentation. So Cindy, would you please introduce yourself and step up to the corner there if you want? I know you got a...
Can I just sit by this?
Yeah, you sure can.
Okay.
Whatever makes it work for you.
All right, thank you.
And Scott, thank you for putting this together and getting us
Thanks
organized.
for asking me. I'm Cindy Jablonski. I'm the wildlife ecologist with McHenry County Conservation District. I did a lot of research because I really didn't know much about spongy moth, but I learned a lot. So I'm going to share some biology with you and my viewpoints as a wildlife ecologist. On the left side, you see the egg masses. In the middle is the caterpillar or the larvae, and on the right is the adult moth. The female is the white one, and the male is the brown one. There are 4 stages. The eggs are laid in August. They can be small egg casings or large, anywhere from 200 eggs to 1,000 eggs. The eggs overwinter, and they emerge in the following spring. They feed for several weeks, and then they turn into a pupa or, cocoon, where the adult moth is formed, and the only function of the adult moth is to reproduce. They don't eat. In fact, they don't have mouth parts. The male caterpillars can grow to 1.5 to 2 inches long, but females are much larger, 2.5 to 3 inches long. You can see by the pupas there that the female is much larger than the male. The female moths do not fly. I think that's weird. I had to triple check that myself, but they don't fly. Where they pupate is where they lay their eggs. They release pheromones, and the males fly to the females. Their natural only natural dispersal method is through ballooning. That is where the newly hatched larvae, they're less than a 1/4 inch, climb up into the tree and they're attached by a thread and they dangle there and wherever the wind takes them, basically. They can go up to 150 yards. Usually it's just to the next tree. Again, it depends on the weather, wherever they go, what's on the other side of the breeze, where they're going to land. These are some of their favorite foods and some things that they won't touch. As my boss said, the steak, the hamburger, and the broccoli, basically. Do you want me to leave this up to look at those for a minute, or are you okay if I move on?
Yeah, no, you can move on, yeah.
This is this graph you can apply to really any wildlife population that explodes for whatever reasons. From what I understand, the spongy moth will explode after a particularly dry spring. The bacteria and fungus that would normally keep them in check is less because of the dry weather. But when it explodes, they cannot maintain those population levels. And I'm talking about any wildlife population. Starvation, disease, predation, they all move in and then they will crash. Oops, did I do something wrong? That doesn't. Put it back on the slideshow. Is it better? Sorry.
Thanks for using WebEx. Visit our website at www.webex.com.
That's okay.
Okay, so we heard a little bit about BT. It is a bacteria-based pesticide. It is only targets the insects in the order Lepidoptera. That it means all moths and all butterflies, anything that is a caterpillar. These are some of our common butterflies whose caterpillar feed on the trees in our
Excuse me,
woodlands.
Cindy, I don't mean to interrupt, but I just want to make sure I was clear. Is that the BTK?
BTK, yes.
BTK, that's
Yes.
the same thing that
It's the same thing.
you were talking about?
Yes,
Okay.
the K is a subspecies.
But it does affect all butterflies, everything
All
like that?
caterpillars. It does the same thing to all caterpillars.
Okay, thank you.
It is more toxic to the smaller caterpillars. It becomes less effective as the caterpillars get to 1 to 1.5 inches long. Spraying occurs in early spring when the biomass of the insects is mostly caterpillars in the tree canopy. The long-term toxicity depends on the environment. Rain and sunlight will break it down. So it can go from several days to months, depending on the environment. The reduction in caterpillars from spraying BT impacts other wildlife groups, and that's what I'm going to get into. This is the most obvious one. All young birds eat caterpillars. Seed-eating birds do not come out of their eggs eating seeds. They all eat soft-bodied insects. Most of them eat caterpillars. There's a few reasons why. There's a lot of them. They're easy to catch and they're high in nutritional value, particularly carotenoids, which helps their immune system, and it's for their coloring in their wings. It depends on that. So someone actually did this research where they counted how many caterpillars were fed to a nest of Carolina chickadees. Carolina chickadees are very small birds, and they counted, depending on the size of the nest, they estimated between 6,000 to 9,000 caterpillars before they leave the nest. And what they didn't say is they are fed after the parents still feed the young after they leave the nest. So what will happen is they'll shift. If there's no caterpillars, they'll still have young, but they will shift to other insects. And other insects are not going to be as easy to catch. They're not going to be as plentiful at that time of year. And the parents will have to eat more because they're using more resources to catch the other insects. So you end up with smaller clutches, high mortality, and fewer offspring. These are some of the other groups that just came to mind quickly. Bats, they fly at night. That's when they eat. Bats in particular, I don't know if anyone's aware of it, but they already have a lot of problems. White nose syndrome, has anyone heard of that? Well, northern long-eared bats, which were once common in McHenry County, are now federally endangered, and I wouldn't be surprised if they're extirpated from the county entirely. Little brown bats have also been affected. We have a barn in Glacial Park where maternal little brown bats roost every year, and I've been doing a head count since 2013. In 2013, we had 1,400 young, bats raising young. Last year we had 88, and that was up from the year before when we had 45. So our bats already have a lot of problems.
What was the disease or something that they?
It's white nose syndrome. It's a fungus. Of course, it's from another country, and it affects the younger one, or the smaller ones, more than the larger ones, which is the little brown bats and the northern long-eared bats. But it's moving from the east and moving west. It's just been devastating to our bats. So, on the right-hand side, we have a whippoorwill and a nighthawk. They only catch flying insects, and they feed in the evening hours. Their populations are also on decline, steep declines, and they're listed as species of concern. There are also insects that eat caterpillars. The one on the left is a paper wasp. The one, my arrow didn't line up really good here, but it's supposed to be pointing to that tiny larvae. That is a minor wasp larvae. Every minor wasp in the family, and there's many species in the family of minor wasps, has the same strategy for their young. They will deposit an egg in the stem of a dead plant, something like that, and then they will stuff little green caterpillars in there and seal it off, and the larvae will eat those green caterpillars throughout this, until it turns into an adult wasp. But that's it. There's no shift for them. They only eat caterpillars. Now, I know wasps aren't warm and cuddly, but they're necessary. So that's an entire family that would not be able to feed their young. So, and I really feel bad about what happened to your trees. I'm a homeowner, and I love my trees too. Dispersal of the larvae is really random. Where the wind takes them, basically, is where they're going to land. McHenry County forests are very fragmented. We did a study in 2005. We identified 3,000 blocks of wood, and 2,800 of those blocks of wood were less than 10 acres in size. The BTK targets all Lepidoptera larvae, all moths and caterpillars. And it becomes less effective once those caterpillars are over 1.5 inches. And the spongy moth males will get up to 2 inches, the females will get up to 3 inches. So the timing is so critical for any type of spraying on that. And at a certain point, when those spongy moth larvae get bigger, the BT will just target the non-target caterpillars that are smaller. So, I think spraying a few trees in a small area, honestly, if I had a tree covered in egg masses in my yard, I would, probably do something about it. But mass spraying of insecticide over a large area just has an incredible impact on wildlife. And I wasn't gonna mention this because I thought Nancy was gonna be here, but this whole Slow the Spread campaign is kind of trying to slow the spread from moving west. Well, they're here. They're already in McHenry County, they're past McHenry County. Nancy said that the USDA has no intentions of any spraying for slow the spread in McHenry County because they're already here. Now, they are already here, and usually something keeps them in check. And from what I understand, a dry spring is what caused this explosion. We're hoping for a really wet spring. And I had one more slide. I wasn't sure if I'm going to show it, but I'm going to show it to you. I think this is really interesting. It is not a spongy moth, but it's relevant to what we're talking about. This is a rusty patch bumblebee. They are federally endangered. You can see the light area where they used to be their historic range was, and the red dots are where they're currently found. And the yellow around them is a buffer indicating that they might be in those areas. Now look at McHenry County. We are blessed with this federally endangered bumblebee. It's a, it's an obligation. We need to be thoughtful about spraying pesticides. That's all I got. Yeah.
I was in the Smoky Mountains, I think about 10 years ago, and they were introducing a predator. They had struggled with gypsy moths. It was, you could look out and see the grave, the dead trees. And I tried to track it down after I heard from Mary Lou. And I don't know, is anybody doing research on?
I haven't heard that.
Okay.
I'm usually pretty up on biological
They were getting ready
controls.
to launch it when I was hiking through there. I didn't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
I had 10 minutes and I thought I'd just present as a wildlife ecologist.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah, go ahead, Carolyn.
For clarification, so it's the light green that used to be the range. Because sometimes you miss that, because sometimes the background can be.
Yeah.
The light green was the prior range. They're concentrated in the red and the light yellow.
That's where the current observations are, and the yellow is a buffer where they think they probably are. But we're in a critical spot for this rare bumblebee, and I'm not saying spraying BT is going to affect them. I'm just saying that we need to be thoughtful about how we use our pesticides and the unintentional consequences. And,
Okay, Scott, you wanted to add something to add?
Cindy, if you could, with regards to gypsy moths or spongy moths, can you let the committee know what the conservation district strategy will be or has been?
We are not spraying. We are not going to spray for a gypsy moth based on this information. It's just, I did look around and I asked my staff, I said, have you seen anything? And I went to a couple forests and I looked for egg masses. I had one person that said, yes, we saw a bunch of spongy moths on some willows. She pointed it out on a map. It was surrounded by hayfield, so I went to the nearby woods where, the next woods where it was, and I didn't find any egg masses. So the dispersal methods are so random, to mass spray as a possible preventative has such impacts on our environment.
Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead, Jim.
Cindy, when you were showing that chart of the increase
Sure.
and then the crash,
It's called the boom and bust
what's the
cycle.
duration of that in most cases?
Well,
I mean, is it a number of years or is
well,
it?
from what I got that slide from a presentation by Wisconsin DNR. Two entomologists presented in the handout. I think that I provided another graph, and there was an outbreak in 2010, and they measured defoliation in trees, and they had a huge acreage of defoliations, a few thousand, and the next year there was nothing. So again, we're hoping for a wet spring to help the bacteria and the virus and fungus spread and keep this in check. There was a research paper that showed that the spruce budworm, which we don't have, thank goodness, but over on the East Coast, when there was an outbreak, they showed a 5-fold increase in woodland nesting birds. You know, predation,
Right.
disease, it comes in. You can see that in every wildlife group. And I get it about the trees. I mean, I get it. I love my trees, you know.
Well, and I was reading some of that stuff last night, a little bit about that too, and I understand what you're saying is, I mean, it's gonna take out all the butterflies.
And not
because
just
of-
that, there
because
are
of the monarch.
cascading impacts to
And-
other
right.
wildlife groups.
Right, and the bumblebee and different.
Well, not the
things.
bumblebees,
But-
that's separate.
But it's gonna just, it will if we do a massive spray in the county. We're gonna
It's just,
destroy
the
that.
impact is huge.
And it's like, feel bad for the real infested areas.
I get
And
it.
I don't
I just have-
understand
what's
if there's a
massive?
way we could do it, they could do it and just.
You know, like I said, if I was a homeowner and my neighbor had it or I had it, I would probably invest in spraying if I had a tree that I really loved and I was worried about. From what I understand, not my experience, a healthy tree will be okay, but there's no guarantee just because someone says, well, it should be okay.
When I was a kid on the farm, we used to, we had back then had oak wilt disease and that. and
Well, we still have that burrow wilt disease. There's
Right,
a
and-
fungus that affects the red oaks.
And we used to have to go to the extension office, and they gave us treatments and different things. Is that still the case, the university extension
I
and all
don't,
that?
you know, I don't know.
Has that been all cut?
I called up Nancy and I said, are you doing any spraying in McHenry County? She said, no, we are not. We are never gonna spray in McHenry County. It's already here. It's moved west.
So it sounds like it sounds like we're in the midst of this.
From
And
what I
there's-
understand, they're here. They're
They're-
all over the
right.
place, but they're just being kept in
And
check.
so they will exhaust their food source, be impacted by climate, and then they're gonna move on. Is-
No, their populations will decrease. They'll
Okay,
still be here.
because that's what species do.
They will still be here, but. I know.
Anyway, Frank, I know you want to talk, but if we let the public get going back and forth, and then, this is a small group today, so it's sort of good, but,
There's only the clarity of some points that we've learned from Nancy Johnson, who we wish could have been here, is the fact that
yeah, okay.
it's the timing of the
But no,
spray.
not from the public right now, thank
I'm
you.
not done. I know.
Yeah, Cindy, if I don't have any more questions, obviously it's a dilemma,
It is a dilemma.
I mean,
It
we
is a
got people
dilemma.
here that are being hurt and
I get it.
asking for our help,
I
and
get it.
I want to dig into this a little bit more. I asked about the extension office. Is there any other agriculture, university, or public that actually takes an area like this and they come
The
in?
USDA is in charge of the Slow the Spread campaign. It's already in McHenry County and it's moved west. So the Slow the Spread is not gonna,
So
it's
they're
not here.
gonna do anything.
They're not gonna do anything.
Okay.
They are the expert on the pesticides and, you know, I'm just presenting the biological impacts.
But the upside is, when the small birds and the whippoorwills do find their food, you may have a population growth in birds, I mean, having hundreds of acres of forestry,
The ecology is really
to watch,
complicated.
right?
It's
I mean,
complicated
you
and,
see a lot of birds and a lot of woodpeckers, you know what's going on.
yeah. I'll tell you another
Yeah.
thing that happened. Remember emerald ash borer,
Right,
You know what we have now that's really common and never was before? Pileated woodpeckers. I don't know
Right.
if you've seen them. They
We
have
do at
moved
our
in.
place too, yeah.
They love the stuff that's sitting in the dead bark of those ash trees, I'm
Yeah.
not saying kill the trees, and that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying it's really complicated and somehow nature works it out. Not always like we want.
Yeah.
But when we start trying to control things, it just goes really haywire.
I think the unintended consequences of spraying
That's exactly
is-
right.
Yeah.
so Scott, Nancy, what would she bring to the table? Should we have Nancy?
She would give an overall larger picture of the I thought she would be presenting that, and really, it's not my area of expertise.
Okay.
But there is so much information on the website. You can contact USDA. She got back to me within a day after I left a message for her. You can contact them, and they will give you that kind of information.
Is she located in the area?
If I may,
Yeah, go ahead. Sure.
we tried to get her out, and she wanted to be here. Unfortunately, because this is the critical time for dealing with the spongy moths, and she's working on that leading edge, which is west of us on the spread. They want to stop it from going western. So she's focusing all her efforts there, and she was not able to be here today. She can be here next month, and what would be helpful, and you ask what would she bring to the table, she can give you a much broader picture of their efforts of sow the spread, and she would really talk about how that population ebbs and flows, and she would talk about some of the efforts that they're doing. I had a lot of good conversation with Nancy. She is a wealth of knowledge, and she can provide you historical data, which I think is very relevant to this conversation, because in 2009, 2010, there was a big spike, and the graph that Cindy put on the screen, very similar. McHenry County was a victim of that spread, but this county is infested, and it's the term that they use, where they won't invest any money into here because you're not going to do anything. You can remediate certain areas if there's a stand of trees. If you do apply some treatment, you'll stop that population that year. You can preserve the trees. Trees will recover, assuming there's not other stressors like drought or anything. After a year or so, they spring back. But what Nancy wants to show you is that historical change. She does all the trapping data. And she would put the soil spread data on the screen, and it really paints the picture of what we're looking at. 2009, 2010 was a spike. McHenry County invested money into spraying certain targeted areas, primarily in the southeastern quadrant of the county, and they spent between $9,000 to $30-some thousand between those 2 years, partnering with other agencies, townships and municipalities, on very small targeted areas. But that was the extent of the county's involvement with the spraying program. 2011, that was discontinued, but the population after 2010 was a high spike. 2011, it crashed, and it's been it's a low population. We saw last year, we anticipate this year it's going to be a spike. Now the question is it going to follow the same trend where it's going to crash? Nancy will say that is, and I think Cindy can evaluate, that is how the population goes. Once it spikes, it'll crash. So it's going to be a bad year likely this year, assuming we don't have some other factors that help keep the population down. Next year, population should crash. But I just want to give a little context of that, and I'd be happy to get Nancy out. She said she can be here in May, and if it's the committee's pleasure.
She comes from DeKalb?
I believe so. Yeah, so she's fairly local, but she just unfortunately should not be here this morning.
Yeah, that's too bad. I don't know if the rest of the committee feels, I think it would be worthwhile. I have some questions for her. What was the effect on the other insects and birds after they sprayed in 2010, if she has any historical values there? I mean, that's really the dilemma we have, is we would like to be helpful and do something, but we're also being told that it could have consequences. And so if she could shed some light on that for us at the next meeting, that would be great.
I would like to be thorough, that we really thoughtfully took this apart, because I really get the impact.
Yeah, Cindy, thank you very much.
Okay,
I appreciate what you brought to the table. It just certainly a perspective that we needed to hear about.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you, Cindy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I'll invite Nancy to come to the next month's meeting. One thing to keep in mind, timing is critical, so if there is anything, it has to be done soon when those caterpillars are small. If there's any spraying, whether it's to the county or private owners, because they can do that as well. There's there are firms, and they can contract to spray their areas. But we'll get more information.
well, it would be the first part of May when we have our meeting, and it sounded like we can spray into May and June.
That's your window, yes.
That's it, so.
One more, Cindy, aren't we a migratory path for the butterflies through?
Are you talking about monarchs, basically?
Yeah.
I don't think monarchs would be affected because they wouldn't be spraying.
Okay.
Fields but there are butterflies that use our woodlands. The adult butterflies go out into the open areas and forage, but they will lay their eggs in woodlands.
Thank you.
Anything further, Scott, other than, okay, if you could work on coordinating that for us for the next meeting, that would be great.
Will do.
All right, thank you. Okay, if there's nothing else on that, we're gonna move on to the routine consent agenda. Well, do you want it removed? No. Okay. Routine consent agenda, could I have a motion to approve the routine consent? Motion by Carolyn, seconded by Jim. Adam, you got a little insight on this?
Sure. This position was one that built to, over years, to a 9N at that point, through the previous employee. And it was, as more responsibilities went into that code enforcement coordinator, code enforcement inspector position, it was upgraded. And that was over a course of 20 years while she was at the department. Once that person retired, we looked at it a little bit differently, kind of shifted some responsibilities to the division heads, and made this role more of a coordinator position. That was mildly successful. Now this position, as we filled it, it's taking on all those same roles that it grew to be previously. So everything from investigations, evidence collection, interviews, deciding how and when to apply a violation, which ends up being a permanent mark on the property, or not apply a violation and continue investigating to vet it or to close it as a kind of an ask and answer technique. So it became pretty obvious, actually through the annual report as we were compiling all the data, that the sheer numbers of case types and case files that were handled by this one individual was large. It was about 683 violations that were administered last year through one person, and then some that weren't open, that were vetted, like we were talking about, compared to about 2,000 permit reviews that were handled by a staff of 10. So it was there's a large burden shouldered by this role.
Okay, well, I see that there's no effect on your budget by doing this, even though there is an increase of $9,000 to this particular position. Is that because of other positions being filled by newer people coming in at lower levels?
Correct. We've had some vacancies as well, so it's under the wire, but
okay.
it's just.
We got a high performer though in this role, and you want to retain him.
Yes, yeah. I mean, trying to talk about the position, but that's the other major factor, is we have a very high.
Well, I'm sure over the years it's become a lot more technical than when it was 20, 30 years ago. So when we have the resolution here, it says 7N position to enforcement officer grade 9E position. What's the 10 after that written there for?
I think that's an e-scribe trick that I would put on there to cap to show that it was done. I think it's just something I didn't take off.
Oh, okay.
Thanks.
Yeah, no problem. I just was curious. I hadn't seen that before.
Okay.
Thanks for pointing that out.
Go ahead, Jim.
What's the base salary on the 7E?
On the 7E, on the 7N, I think it equates. So that's one of the others. It would change from a punch in to an exempt position. But it is. Find that number exactly. I think it equates to
Just
about
approximately.
50.
All right,
Round numbers.
And so even with more money, you're gonna try to retain this person because it's more money. But it certainly doesn't solve the problem that they're already overworked on that position, right? Because they're not opening files. They're not opening files that they currently have.
They're able to, and that's really another big factor is that this person is they're spent 27 years in law enforcement, handling investigations and case types. They can get through the minutia pretty quick. And they've changed the processes that how we operate in terms of code enforcement. I mean, it's a lot more outreach, a lot more phone calls, a lot more interviews.
Okay.
And it's been hard, please.
Yeah, no, that answers my question.
Is there still a burden? Yes, there is. And it would be great to have more, but we're able to do what we need.
Okay, anyone else have anything? We'll go to vote. Jim?
Yes.
Lou?
Yes.
Carolyn?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
Carl?
Yep.
And I'll vote yes, so this will move forward to the full county board.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Adam. Okay,
Thank
we're gonna have a discussion.
That Scrivener's error will be corrected.
Yeah, it'll be corrected. It will be
Very
corrected.
concerned about, very concerned about that.
Yeah, come on up, Daddy. Discussion and direction about renewal of McHenry Township solid waste franchise agreement.
Yes, so our current agreement will expire at the end of January 2024. So I do like to come to the committee and just see if there are any concerns or any other issues you'd like to address before we enter the renewal process. This area currently serves 7,040 properties that are eligible. We have an 87% participation rate, so that's just over 6,100 properties participating. And so it's kind of a lengthy process. Typically what we would do is work with the purchasing department to get a quote together, send that out, get the information back, notify all of our residents through a mailing. We do a public meeting typically and then enter the county board process. But before we did that, I just wanted to see if there were any concerns or any new direction that you would like us to take back and incorporate into the process.
What company is doing it right now?
Currently, it's LRS, so this is one that was, actually the bid was won last time in 2017 by Lakes Disposal. That was an independent company. During the past 4 years, it's been purchased by LRS. So we don't have those independent companies really anymore. There's 5 left, waste haulers, it's Flood Brothers, it's Groot, it's LRS, MDC, and Waste Management. So those are really the 5 that are working in Northern Illinois currently.
Okay, anybody have anything? Go ahead, Jim.
We don't, at least I haven't heard this time. The last time around, we used to have a lot of complaints on that previous, but they got bought out, maybe they changed it.
Yes.
But we don't have those complaints anymore like we used to in the past?
Right, so.
In that area?
Right, so when this one, we had, I'd say approximately 200 complaints when Lakes Disposal had it. Now, it was not on the service itself typically. It was not on that their problems were not resolved, but it was on their customer service. And so with the newer company, we have had a few complaints because now it's so large, they go to a call center, but they are a fraction of what we had.
Okay.
That's correct.
Okay, because we used to hear that a lot.
Sure. That's
Joe, did you have something on?
And we also had, I know one of these, and it may not have been this one, we switched companies sometime maybe 4 or 5 years ago,
Yes.
where the one company had 7,000 trash cans, and suddenly they didn't win the bid.
That is
So I
correct.
remember hearing about that too.
So that was per.
Brand new
Brand
cans.
new can.
And the question was, there was a question whether the bidding process was proper or not.
Correct,
And
and
that's-
it was, and we worked with Adam to ensure that it was, but yes.
Okay.
And so that is part of the process and why we like to leave extra room, because if another vendor does win the bid, it takes them approximately 90 days to get those carts, get the carts delivered, and get the other carts picked up by the other company. Mhm.
Okay, so that bidding process was not anything on our end that was an
Correct.
issue? It was
That
a
is correct.
misperception from the vendor?
That is correct.
Okay.
So, just
Go ahead,
a
Carol.
question. So these are 7,000 properties that are eligible
Yes.
for this, that are in unincorporated?
Unincorporated in McHenry Township, and we have a small number in Greenwood Township and in an unincorporated area, but yes, they're all
Well,
unincorporated.
the idea, Carolyn, is if we do this contract for them, they don't have 5 different trucks running up and down the road all week long.
Yeah, no, that's, yeah, because I wasn't around for the last time, so I'm just trying to catch
Oh,
up.
okay.
But so,
And
okay,
they
thank
do
you.
receive very comprehensive services, including landscape waste pickup and leaf vacuuming,
Oh,
and at very competitive prices.
okay.
Okay.
Mr. Smith,
Yeah, go ahead.
this is just for the township.
not the municipalities, or is it encompassing everything
It
that's in?
would not be any municipality area, is it?
That is correct. Those are done independently by each municipality.
But typically go with the one you get for the township?
No, they all go through the same bidding process that we
Okay.
do, and then, you know, dependent upon the services that they want for their residents.
All right.
Yeah, okay. Sounds like you have it under control. I don't have any other questions. I would say move forward and put it in place.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, old business, no reports. The zoning applicants going before the county board. Renee?
Okay.
And hopefully you could touch on the one that Mr. Saladin was here.
Yes.
Give us some insight, please.
Okay. So you have 6 petitions to vote on this time. 3 of them are less controversial and 3 are more controversial. So the less controversial ones, you have a couple of variations that are pretty straightforward. And then the text amendment for solar. And when that went to hearing before ZBA, the defenders were represented and had some comments, and Mary McCann spoke as well and brought a model ordinance from the Farm Bureau. So we took all of that information into consideration, made a couple of small changes. You'll see those, added some definitions, that sort of thing. But by and large, it's the same as the last time you saw it. And on the regular consent agenda is 2241, and that's the one that Mr. Saladin just spoke to. It's Ojeda. It's a conditional use renewal for a mulch and sawmill business. So this company takes primarily wooden pallets and breaks them down into mulch. They have been in operation for a while. This is a renewal of their conditional use permit. When the last conditional use permit was issued, they were required to put in some screening, and there was also a condition that said the processed materials had to be stored in 6-foot tall bins. So they installed the bins, but since that time, there's been a few violation cases with them because the materials they store in the bins are well above the 6 feet tall. And it was, the staff felt the intention was that the reason for the 6-foot bins is to reduce those processed stockpiles. So we've had about 3 cases, I guess, in court with them. They've pled guilty each time, but haven't had much success in getting those stockpiles reduced.
This is Singh?
I'm sorry, this is Ojeda.
Ojeda, thank you.
So when they had their public hearing, we had, as staff, had suggested that we clean up the language of that condition to make it clear that the stockpiles inside the 6-foot bins also be 6 feet. So the zoning board, in their deliberations, they decided to add in that same condition that the processed and pre-processed piles be 6 feet. But then later on in their deliberation, they decided that the pre-processed piles could be up to 15 feet. So what Mr. Saladin was pointing out is there is some inconsistency as it stands in the conditions that the zoning board has recommended as well.
So, Mr. Saladin was requesting for his client 18 feet for both.
Correct.
But we have one of them at 15 feet already.
Correct.
And that's the pre-process.
That's the pre-processed pile. So if you drive by the property, that's the stacks of pallets that are out there.
Yeah, and I know the property pretty well. I don't know if anyone else does from the committee, but it seems
Oh, yeah.
like the pre-processed pallets would be more of a concern or eyesore than the processed material. So if
The unprocessed logs and brush.
yeah, so if the pre-processed stuff can be 15 feet, I personally wouldn't have any problem with the process being 15 feet, I don't know.
Aren't they asking for 18 feet though?
That's what Mr. Saladin was asking, because that's how high the client's conveyor goes.
And have there been neighbors complaining on this last UDO? My understanding is we had no neighbors complain on this one.
No, we didn't.
So my issue is I really don't care about the 18 feet because 3 foot taller on pallets, you take away that 3 feet, it makes a big wider pile if you're
Yeah.
going 15 feet.
Well, and I don't think that he would worry about stacking pallets that high particularly, maybe, but it's the conveyor with the stuff that's already processed. That's where the pile runs up the conveyor and drops it at 18 feet. So,
I don't have an issue with 18 feet.
Okay.
I've been past it dozens of times
I
too in the
agree.
last 20 years. And I don't see that 3 feet's gonna make any difference to anybody.
it doesn't make a whole lot of difference in how things look. So whatever you guys
It
want.
still looks lousy.
You know,
It still looks
The
lousy.
other thing too is, and on that note too, Joe, is, yeah, it does, but it's a service that's kind of required. I mean, you need that service.
Well, they're processing
I mean,
pallets.
it's
they're
not the most attractive thing,
Yeah.
but somebody's gotta do it.
They're repurposing these pallets, and if they don't get ground into mulch, they go in a landfill somewhere.
Right? So, I mean,
it's a pretty.
One of those
it
things.
works, yeah. Carolyn, did you have something?
I did. Can you explain further about the, I think they only wanted to renew it one more time, so that was 10 years. And they said something about then they were committed to restoring the property. And then what would be, I guess I should know this, but what would be this, what's the zoning in there? And what would they be
It's
restoring?
ag zoning.
The
I'm sorry?
zoning is A1.
And they
A1.
would restore it to just, like, to clean it up and
Well,
that's the
there's currently
idea?
a residence on the property as well.
Okay.
So, restoring in my mind would mean that they would just get rid of all the equipment and stockpiles and restore the lawn area.
Related to the business. The business would be gone in the end
Business
of
would
10
be
years.
gone.
I don't think there's any real environmental impact with just brush and wood chips.
Oh, no, I know that. I was just trying to
So
envision, so
restore
they're,
would be cleanup mostly, right?
right, just clean up and removal.
Yeah.
And even then, I would remind everybody that no matter what it says about 10 years from now, 10 years from now, somebody can ask us to do something different. I mean, I think it's a nice gesture on their part, but I don't think it binds anybody.
And in 10 years from now, if they're gonna go out of business and sell that property, they're gonna clean it up anyway.
Or they might sell it to somebody who wants to run a lumber mill.
Yeah. Lou?
I think for me, if neighbors aren't complaining, if we're not hearing from the neighbors, then why not?
Right, I don't wanna put anybody out of business, that's for sure.
Especially since we've let them be in business for 20 years.
Right.
It's
right.
tough to explain.
It's not new, it's a renewal,
Yeah.
right?
And I will also point out the vote was 4-3 for. So had one of those three voted for, then it would have been on the consent agenda for approval.
So it's not gonna be on the consent agenda, it sounds like this
We have to
committee is.
make a motion.
Pardon?
We have to make a motion when we get to the board floor.
Right. So I don't, if you want to decide between yourselves, or which one of you guys want to do it, or if you want me to do it, to make an amendment on the board floor.
I would ask staff to prepare an amendment to the
Okay.
18 feet. And if you don't do it, I'll do it, but whoever, I'm not
Yeah,
necessarily, but I
I
think
have
I'd
no-
like to have it ready.
Yeah, I'll take care of it if staff does the amendment for me, it's fine.
Sure.
Jim, do you have one?
One other thing I'd like to pin down here is that 6-foot bends and the stock in the 6-foot bends. Explain that a little better for me. I mean, I'm imagining a 6-foot tall bend and they throw in a 8-foot long or 10-foot long piece in there. Is that what I'm
The
picturing?
bins are for the mulch materials, for the
Oh.
processed materials.
So it's piled up 2 or 3 feet higher.
It's gonna be piled up.
10 feet.
They're asking for 18 feet, so it's 12 feet higher.
No, I'm talking about the bins themselves.
The
that are
bin,
6 foot tall.
the bin is 6 foot, correct, and then
Probably
they're
for
asking for
transportation.
And so they're saying
18-foot
18
piles
feet in the center of it.
inside the bins.
It's just, and the dimension of those 6-foot beds, is there any
Condominium.
limit to that?
Mhm.
There's no limit, right? concrete.
The bins
block.
are out there
Yeah.
now. They were permitted, so,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, then, my
Yeah.
question was a little confused there.
I would be too, I thought a bin was a trash can.
Yeah, I
Oh.
thought that's what they were talking about,
Sorry,
the
no,
violation.
it's the concrete
Right,
block,
now I get it.
recited
Now I
concrete
totally
block.
get it.
It's
Yeah.
the wall.
Yeah,
Yeah,
That's just to hold it from.
so they can get the
escape.
truck in,
Yeah.
load the truck up.
yeah, I don't have any opposition to it,
No.
the way it exists then.
Again, it's a service, it's gotta be, somebody's gotta do it.
Yeah, okay.
Okay?
Okay, on that one, Renee,
Okay.
anything else that we should be aware of?
Yes. And this one is gonna be extremely hard to explain. So once you get your packets, I'm sure there will be questions and we'll be happy to talk to anyone about them. 2247, the petition applicant is Singh. They're proposing to take an A1 parcel and to develop it with a semi-truck parking facility. So what they mean by that is, I'm a truck driver, I need somewhere to park my truck over the weekend, or if I'm off for a week, then I rent space from them and park my semi-truck there. So in order to do that, they needed to rezone the property to the B3 zoning district. They needed the conditional use permit for an outdoor storage yard as the principal use of the property. And then they were asking for two variations also. We require paving for a storage yard like that as a primary use. So they were asking for a waiver from our paving requirements. And they were asking, the way the zoning ordinance is written currently, it doesn't really allow for this kind of use because there is a use standard for outdoor storage yards that basically says any equipment stored has to be owned by whoever owns the yard. So they were asking for a variation from that standard as well. So the zoning board, by and large, were not in favor of the project as a whole. That they decided to break down every request and take every request individually. So they denied the reclassification on a vote of 5-2. They denied the CUP on a vote of 5-2. However, they did recommend conditions. So if you guys decide that they should get the CUP, then there are conditions that were recommended by the ZBA. They denied the variance on paving by a vote of 6-1. And they approved the variance on the ownership. So their thinking there is, this isn't a bad idea, maybe there is a place for this kind of business, so we shouldn't just preclude it completely. What I will also clarify is the variation on paving, because that was recommended denial. If the board decided that they wanted to approve that, it would require the supermajority vote in order to approve that.
Which is 14.
14, yes.
And where's it located at?
On 47 south of Woodstock.
So that would be
Truck there.
47 south of Woodstock.
North or south of 14.
Would that be like near the RV place or?
Do you want to bring me it's Singh, and I'll show you the elevation map. Pictures worth 1,000 words in a planner's mind.
What's the PIN number? If you know, if you got that.
Is anything there now?
There is, it
It's unpaved.
is unpaved. I think
What?
someone was.
I can tell you it's unpaved.
Let me grab the,
It's 47 and
South of Woodstock, that would be down near 14.
Well, it'd be south of 14.
South of 14, I believe.
It has to be out by
well, it's
Rikers.
north of 176.
Right in that corridor
You
there.
got the landscape,
Here.
Not quite as far as home.
but yeah, you got the landscape people there.
Yeah.
On the east side, or west side of 47.
There's a whole bunch of stuff.
Oh,
There's no map.
so there's a lot. You'll, when you see the staff report, there's a lot there. I believe the 2030 plan shows this area as retail. The zoning board discussed that B3 would be the tool to get retail in that area. However, they felt that it was premature at this point, that eventually, sure, that area might be developed with retail, but right now there's no trend of development to support that.
I'm sure we can look back to there, but they were okay with a variance, basically if it were paved. Is that an honest recap or no?
No, they
Okay.
didn't like the proposal
At
at
all.
all, is
Okay,
is
good
the
enough.
easiest way to say it.
Good enough.
Can you read me the PIN, Carolyn? What the property index number is on it? I'm sure it's in that page you got in your hand someplace.
And Route 47 is,
No, it doesn't, not on the
Route
PIN
47 is kind of a hodgepodge.
Well, you could too, but.
Joe, it's 13, 29, 200, 008.
I know exactly where that property's at. It might not be a good fit down the road for future planning.
Sounds like economics will take care of that. You know, if it becomes retail development, it's gonna be worth a lot more than.
Yeah,
they're
right.
doing big.
Not,
In the parking lot.
that's a pretty lucrative business, the truck parking rental. They get a lot of money for those spots.
Yeah, I bet.
And,
Well, and the
they were
new,
putting a number of them in. I don't remember
the
the
new
number.
BP is not gonna allow, you're not, you know, it's going on 47 near McDonald's, it's not gonna allow truck parking. Well, you're not gonna, and they have to assure residents that there's no showers, there's no layovers for truck drivers.
Yeah, just a park the truck.
Yeah, you can't even do it
Leave it there, go home.
They don't even want
No,
them to
she's
do
talking
it.
about
The new gas
new
station.
gas station.
It's not a gas
Oh,
station.
yeah, I
It's
know
a-
what you're talking about, yeah.
It's a
Gordon.
fresh market oasis.
That's in
It's Thornton's.
I'm sorry, yeah, it's in Lakewood.
It's in Lakewood and
It's
it's at
in-
Thornton's, that one's at the corner of 47 and 176 going east.
A true tomorrow piece though also. I don't think
It's right near Lucas Road.
176 West, right?
No,
Oh, no, east, it's on
176
the,
east.
it's on the west
Well,
side.
it's
the west
actually
side of
right where Pleasant
176.
Valley
In the
goes.
weeds.
Just for that gas station.
That's where
There's a
they'll
huge,
reconfigure that
there's an absolute
176.
huge
Yeah.
demand for the use, but I don't know.
State does
I'm looking at that pin you just gave me, I don't know why you would put it there.
Carolyn, did you have something?
I do, because I'm looking at the zoning for that day, and there's really no maps, there's really not, where else would I look for information?
For,
Well, I'm looking up the date of the hearing, which is 3/9, and this is really only 8 pages, and it doesn't include the map and all that. Where am I looking for that?
We'll have a map in our packet before the cow, right?
it will be, yes.
So.
But it should already be out there for the zoning meeting, right?
The zoning division is a little slow this month, sorry.
Oh,
It will be there though.
I'm sorry?
And your emails, is that what you're looking?
No, I'm looking on the agenda from the 9th when this thing happened, and there's an 8-page document, and there's no
Oh.
maps or anything. I'm saying, if you're gonna go back and try to catch up, there's nothing out there. This is 8 pages, and it's not really giving you the information.
It kind of sounds like this project's not ready.
No, this is
Their
just
site plan was very lacked in detail, I'll just say that. Okay. So that one is the most complicated, in my opinion.
Well, I'll look forward to the packet.
Get the packet, yes, if you have questions, give us a call.
Yeah.
And then the last one is Shell House. And you probably will be hearing from them, the owners of the property. We're very disappointed in the vote, but it was a request from A1 to R1. So it's my understanding the contract purchaser of this property is buying 12 acres, but they only wanted to rezone 1 acre of the property, so they asked for the R1 zoning. So R1 zoning is our highest density single-family district. So the zoning board was unanimous in their denial of this petition because they felt that to incorporate this one lot into an ag area of the highest density residential allowed was not appropriate and didn't comply with the 2030 plan. But it's not that simple. Across the street is a subdivision that was zoned R1, but it's an isolated subdivision, was zoned many, many years ago. And the 2030 plan actually talks about these kinds of subdivisions, and this subdivision is mapped this way. It's called an isolated residential or subdivision. And what that means is you, typically, you would look at the surrounding zoning to determine the trend of development in the area to decide if what's being asked for is appropriate. But the comp plan is very clear that these isolated subdivisions like this were premature. They don't represent a trend of development, and they should not be used to substantiate a zoning change like this. So for that reason, the zoning board voted to denial.
Okay, yeah, the subdivision is Nolan's. May call on Nolan's Highlands on corner of O'Brien and 173. It's the properties across, properties south of O'Brien. Was he wanting R1 for the whole 12 acres or just the 1 acre he wanted to build?
Just 1 acre of the 12.
Okay, and he had the perception that because the subdivision was across the street, that would be something we could do.
I believe so.
And that would be a very big
And he
setup, because then everybody around there is gonna want a 1 acre thing, and now we've created a
right.
precedent
He
that we
wasn't
can't
represented
fulfill.
at the beginning of the process, but once he saw our staff report, which pointed this out, he did hire Mr. McKenna, so you might be hearing from Mr. McKenna.
So
She's good at reaching out to you guys.
just one question on the tax amendment. It said that this is from us, from P&D committee, but there's a tax amendment. Is this text amendment, did we see this before?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Sent it to
Well, I was
us
just
today.
like, because you said Mary McCann came and added something to it, or is this something we didn't see from Mary, or?
She came with the State Farm
counties.
Bureau has put together a model ordinance, and she presented that at the hearing before the zoning board. So that's why when you see your packet, there were 2 dates of hearing, because the zoning board asked me to take a look at that, look at information that the defenders had brought as well. And that's why there was a 2nd date of hearing, so we could go through that information. But there were very minimal changes made.
Yeah.
Have we seen it, or?
I swear we saw that.
We did see the overall proposal, because what happened was Springfield said, we have to change our ordinance. We have
And that I
so many
remember,
days.
and that I remember.
But I don't know what the changes that they brought to the board were. I mean, I
We
don't.
added some definitions, like we didn't have a definition of participating residents and participating landowners. We added definitions like that. We didn't add anything substantial.
Something that we would see.
Since you saw it.
We'll see in the packet, though?
You
I
will
could-
see it in the
I could
packet.
search that out and find it in the
You will,
packet.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead, Jim.
So all these upcoming zonings, like in the next week or 2, there's a whole slew.
For solar?
Yes, for solar. Those are gonna all be under the new ordinance that we haven't amended yet.
The
Right.
state, right.
So, but before it gets to us, we'll be done with it. We should be done with it before these next hearings get to us. I'm assuming they'll get to us in May, right?
So if you pass the ordinance in April, yes.
That's why they're to
Well, the state dictates
To get
how
the-
long we have till
to
we
get
get
in the
them to
state window,
hearing.
right?
Yeah. So that's why we're rushing them. And just so you guys know, the zoning board is actually gonna meet on Wednesdays and Thursdays to get that we're being bombarded with through the process.
I saw that.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Renee. So
Sure.
Carolyn, go ahead.
Yeah, just a
Okay.
correction,
2000.
sorry about this, because I said the information wasn't out there, it is out there. It's just that the order is flipped in the, when you go to look online for the e-scribe, the minutes are usually first, In this case, they were last, so I always hit the last PDF. And so no, if you go in the middle, it's everything.
It's right there, huh? Okay,
So-
good.
Good.
Sorry about that.
Thank you, Renee. Okay. Anything else, future topics? No executive session needed? Motion to adjourn? Motion by Carolyn, seconded by Carl.
Sure.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.